We are taking the Diddy scandal into territory that I don't think anybody else will. What happens when you bring in a man who has actually hunted monsters? The world is buzzing about the disturbing allegations surrounding Sean Diddy Combs, the 1991 City College of New York Stampede, where 9 people were killed, the murder of Tupac Shakur, the murder of Biggie Smalls, the killing of Jake Robles in 1995, and this alleged bathroom shooting.
Any good leader surrounds himself with people that are willing to take the fall, because they'll soon learn that if they don't, then they themselves will become victims.
These are deaths where Diddy was either present or nearby. It's just violence that seems to be in the orbit of Diddy a lot.
I don't believe there is such a thing as coincidence. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and it would show he's a connecting point.
On murders, they don't. They would certainly go after Diddy again, and I hope they do get him. I think he's going to get charged with more.
I'm Tom Zenner, and today we are taking the Diddy scandal into territory that no one else is going to do right now. The world is buzzing about the disturbing allegations surrounding Sean Diddy Combs. But what happens when you bring in a man who has actually hunted monsters? Gil Carrillo is here with me today, the legendary LA County Sheriff's Detective who helped take down the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, a serial killer. He did it almost 40 years ago. Gil knows patterns of violence, power, and fear, as well as anyone on this planet. And right now, people are asking a shocking question. Is there a deadly pattern around Diddy? Not gossip, but decades of tragedy, shootings, and allegations that are only now being connected thanks to the great documentary by 50 Cent. Gil and I are going to break it down through the eyes of a homicide detective. Is this chaos, coincidence, or something far darker? This is the analysis nobody else can give you, and it may change how you see the Diddy story forever. All right, let's bring him in. One of my favorite guests, Gil Carrillo, enjoying retirement now, but man, you talk about a great career. And Gil, I wanted to have you on just because you have, knowledge and experience, and you became famous for chasing a real serial killer. So you know about as much of as you possibly can when it comes to investigations. You're retired now. Have you had a chance to watch a little bit of the Diddy doc that 50 Cent did?
I have.
Yeah,
I have. Thank you for having me on, Tom. And I have watched. I watched the first part 1, and half of part 2. I've just been so busy. Even though I'm retired, I still keep busy.
Yeah, no, without a doubt you do. I know you travel a lot. I was talking when Cato and I were talking last week. I just thought the whole thing just it's kind of upsetting watching it. Like I was looking forward to it to be over because, just hearing about one guy's trail of carnage that he's responsible for, it just kind of wears you out. But we're going to get into all of that today, Gil. Are you enjoying it? I mean, 50 Cent did a great job as a filmmaker, didn't he?
Right now it is. It's an interesting documentary. Whether I enjoy it or not, it's a sad reality of what's being depicted. It is interesting to me, just as being the investigator that I am.
Right. It's nice you could do it from your couch, right? And watch somebody else do it. But that's what we're going to talk about today, Gil. There's been a series of things surrounding Diddy where people die. Right? There's deaths. Okay. And we're going to go through them today. And I'm just so excited. I know my viewers are really, really excited about hearing your analysis and just your interpretation. And as we break these things down, one is the 1991 City College of New York Stampede, where 9 people were killed. A lot of people remember that news story, but a lot of younger people have no clue about this happening. But man, this is 34 years ago. And I actually remember it just from working in the news. We're also going to talk about the murder of Tupac Shakur, the murder of Biggie Smalls, Christopher Wallace, a big one, the killing of Jake Robles in 1995, the violent surroundings during the 1999 Club New York shooting, no fatalities, but it's going to fit in with what we're talking about today. And then this alleged bathroom shooting that they unveil in the documentary as well that took place in 2022. So, these are deaths, Gil, where Diddy was either present or nearby. It's situations where others have possibly implicated him or accused him of something. And it's just violence that seems to be in the orbit of Diddy a lot. And that's what was revealed here. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So when you hear this, Gil, when you hear about all this stuff that takes place around Diddy, intimidation, there's deaths around him, there's violence. What what jumps out at you first when you hear about this over a pattern over 30 plus years as a homicide detective? When you see some of this and read some of this and hear about the stuff that's gone on around Diddy, what jumps out at you?
The fact that I don't believe in my mind or in my heart that there is such a thing as coincidence. When they're all there, where there's smoke, there's fire, and now it's a matter of looking at it. And if you do a map of it, it would show he's a connecting point. But whether you can prove it or whether there's substantial evidence to show it is another thing. Doesn't mean he's not guilty or not responsible for it, but certainly if he's around it all the time, you'd certainly have to take a hard, definitive look and look a little, scratch that surface.
Are you trained as a homicide detective to separate coincidence from facts, leads, black and white stuff that you're looking at? Or could some detectives believe that coincidence happens, or is that just a non-starter when you come to investigating crimes?
No, that's a non-starter. You prove you have to get to the truth of the matter, whatever the facts show. But when they start showing up, if you have one individual, in this case, Mr. Combs, it makes you realize there's got to be something more than coincidence to be happening. You prove that it's not a coincidence. If you can't prove it, well, then you have to let it go as a coincidence. But that's difficult starter.
Gil, you were famous for just a process, right? With the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, you were the first one that was in law enforcement at that time that put together a series of crimes that happened basically a year before with Richard Ramirez that started off a little smaller, abductions of kids, sometimes some assaults and things like that, some nasty stuff. And then you, over a series of months, you saw some things that linked. I don't know how you did it, but you took a lot of blowback for this. So you've actually lived this, where you just got to follow the clues, follow whatever you're seeing. Walk us through that, and just the courage that it took for you to kind of stand your ground, and that you actually saw someone. What was that? What was it that you saw that you could connect?
Well, I saw things that I had learned about behavior and what it makes you do. And I'm thoroughly convinced that in the case of the Night Stalker, it was motivated. The other things that went along with it were just part of his motivation to achieve his goals. So I found something, and I could see it where others hadn't, because murders such were not prevalent at that time, and nobody had ever been documented doing the things that he had been doing. However, I could see them. So what I had to do, and what we had to do as a team, was then continue to investigate until we found that link, till we found some hardcore physical evidence enough to where we could go ahead and convict him.
Yep. When you're chasing a monster, a killer, a criminal, someone that has a lot of violence around him, you're always going to run into obstacles as an investigator. It's never easy, right? They don't just lay it out for you. Here's one with Diddy that's a little complicated. His fame, his power. When as an investigator, when you're working on a case that involves somebody that's extremely powerful, wealthy, or famous, how does that change your process? It has to. Right? Because he's got layers, he's got people around him. You can't have any missteps. So how do you handle that?
Just like they did with back in the early days of the big Italian mafias. Start at the little man and pick away. And you just pick away until you get enough people to roll. You get enough people down below him. You're essentially breaking his line of defense around him. You're picking them off one by one, and what they have to do. So much time has gone by. People are getting older. There's money involved. So you start picking people off that are willing to come forward and testify now. Because of the fact that so much time has gone by, certainly there are those people that have gone on, that have died. And it's very easy at this point in time to sit there and say, well, the dead guy did it. He's responsible for it. So you just have to find enough people that are still connected, that have contacts.
Yeah. When you use the word pattern, right? And when like us, when somebody watching that doc or talking to you or listening to this podcast right now, you hear pattern, we think of it as means the same action repeated. That's how we look at it. But detectives, do you guys see it a little bit differently? What does behavioral consistency mean to an investigator like you?
Well, depending on what you're looking at, you have to look at their behavior, and you're looking for consistencies, but consistencies are not always available to you. In the Night Stalker case, he was extremely inconsistent in the methods and what he was doing. So you don't always get consistencies. Those are gifts. You're lucky. Somebody once said that was good luck that you did that, and somebody else said you made your luck. You have to continue to dig.
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting thing, and we're going to get into it with these 5 or 6 incidences that have been around Diddy's world, where a lot of people become not living anymore, or just just some things that we have to discuss. There's this thing called a violence orbit, Gil, where you see someone who maybe isn't necessarily pulling the trigger, but somehow violence keeps happening around them. How do you detectives view someone who kind of becomes a magnet for danger like this, even if they're not out there, obviously doing things? There's always these things happening around them.
Well, like I said, initially, you just start picking up from the outside before you get to the center of the mass. Any good leader surrounds himself with people that are willing to take the fall or willing to do anything to protect them, because they'll soon learn that if they don't, then they themselves will become victim. And so you have to rely on the fact that you're going to try and convince those people, if they don't assist us, they're going to become the next victim.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get into these incidences now, Gil, but you've been retired for a while, but Diddy's been around for a long time, 35 years. A lot of these incidences took place in New York City, but a lot are out here in LA too, right? And this is where a lot of the freak off parties were going down. And did you ever get involved in a case that involved him? We had, obviously the Tupac killing and the Biggie killing out here. Sheriffs were involved in that, I would imagine, on some level. But how did you have any colleagues that worked on these, or did you dabble in them at all?
I had where we were, being the sheriff's department, largest sheriff's department in the United States, and we had one centralized homicide bureau. I had 2 of my investigators go on loan to work a task force with LAPD on the Biggie Smalls case. However, in sheriff's homicide, we don't concern ourselves with what others are working. We'll work on our own cases. Or in that case, I was the lieutenant. I wasn't concerned with what they were doing. They were working that case, and I had 12 other investigators that I had to manage down here. So I didn't pay attention to what they were doing, and I didn't really care.
Yeah. It's not like you had a shortage of work or cases to clear of your own, right?
It's another murder.
In LA, unfortunately, that's the case. Okay. I remembered this when I saw this in the doc. I kind of forgot that Diddy's involvement, but man, it refreshed it. 1991, City College of New York Stampede. 9 people died. So it's a celebrity basketball charity event promoted by a very young Puff Daddy Combs, right? This guy's reinvented himself so many times, but you could see how aggressive he was, how he over promoted this event, how he had to have known that there was some danger involved in that, because there's no way this basketball court and arena could support the type of crowd that was around the block and wanted a piece of this thing that Heavy D was at and a number of other celebrities. So he was the lead promoter, Gil, of the event. A civil court found him partially responsible for negligence. He later settled with victims' families. No criminal charges were brought. And this is the earliest deadly event kind of tied to Diddy's orbit in the Netflix doc. And there it was. So, he was pretty crafty of how he would set up his organization too, where he kind of filtered himself from civil liability. But you look at this, if this happened in LA, when 9 people die, shouldn't somebody be held accountable? I mean, doesn't somebody have to be charged with something?
Well, they have to look into it, and I'm not going to go into their investigation. That was New York, but by the mere fact that civilly he was found responsible, where you don't need the degree of evidence that you do in a criminal trial, but yet he was held accountable for part of it. The fact that he was able to pay people off just tells me that they were either given a great amount of money, or they were in fear of their own lives for trying to testify against him. But it certainly shows there's something there.
Yeah. A lot of people say that Diddy became obsessed with control, image, and power after that City College incident. It's almost like a light switch flipped in him. From your experience, is this kind of a tragedy, something that obviously could probably change a person forever, right? You're either going to be moved for the better or the worse from it, especially if you had a hand in it at all, if it's your event that you're promoting. But have you seen something like this where there's that moment where someone can snap and it changes that person either down a better path or down a further destructive path?
Power is a terrible thing to have sometime, and when you're in control. If you look at John Gotti, the Mafia man, he went ahead, he got control, and now he rules everything. He's untouchable. Once these gang leaders become that, their mind becomes obsessed with the power that they have, and they feel they're untouchable. And that's what gives them the emphasis to continue on their path. Hey, if this is bringing them money and bringing them all the good things they want out of life, it's a hard thing to control.
That is so impressive that that makes so much sense, right? You just nailed that thing right there, because a situation like that can either humble somebody or harden them, right? But then if you think, man, I got away with this, right? Not that you tried to, not that he was trying to set up a situation where people would die, but when you can overcome something like that had to be very, very difficult, because that someone was answering a lot of tough questions at that time, including Puff Daddy, I'm sure. But man, you kind of nailed it, right? You get one under your belt where they can't touch me. I'm untouchable. I find a way out of this, and then maybe obviously you're more reckless and careless along the way as you go. So gosh, to think that seed was planted back in 1991, if it had gone differently, who knows, right?
And all those below him think that it's so cool. Now they become loyal followers, and he's the man. He beat it. He's successful. He's got the money. He's got the power. Let's join.
Yeah. And then he owns them, essentially, right? Because they're so dependent on him, whether it's financially, their career, and he's a master manipulator, right? That's one thing this documentary showed, that, man, you get in his web, it's over. When detectives look at someone's history, how do you differentiate recklessness from something more intentional, right? Because 9 people dying is a big deal. I mean, that's a big time tragedy. I mean, that's going to make headlines and national news. Accidents happen, but there's recklessness, there's carelessness, so how do you guys weave through that? Could you see where someone just takes a whole bunch of risks and let the chips fall where they may, and they weren't really maybe intentionally trying to do anything like that? But I mean, it's a lot to sift through as a detective.
Certainly. And there's not, I don't believe that he intended for 9 people to die that night. I that's a tough one to believe. It's too hard to put it all together. But it does show a very high degree of negligence. And where he gained his power was he gathered all these people in one spot. He's the one that set the wheels in motion. And so there is certainly a high degree of negligence. And perhaps out here on the West Coast, perhaps there would have been the degree of negligence that would have led to a criminal trial, as opposed to where it didn't on the East Coast, and not taking anything away from their investigation, because I don't know any of the facts. But it certainly did lead one to believe that his actions caused the events that took place.
Yeah, because you could go down 2 ways: criminally and with civil lawsuits. When you have 9 deaths, right, you're going to be hit in every direction. Businesses can't survive that generally, but he did on both ends. And then you come out of there a little bit emboldened, empowered, right? And you start believing things about yourself, and then you got sycophants around you, right? You can see how this works. It's funny how you compared it to the Mafia a little bit, right? Not that Diddy is doing organized crime, but you see some similarities there from a head mafioso, right? And the people around him
that are willing to conduct criminal acts in order to help him. He's not doing it. They're doing it for him.
Yeah. People associate the Mafia obviously more with the East Coast, but what's the Mafia's presence that you've experienced here in Southern California, in LA?
here we didn't experience much of the old school Italian mafia, we did experience the Mexican mafia out here, MA, and there were parts of the Russian mafia out here, but that's about it. We didn't have any of the stuff that they have in Las Vegas or on the East Coast.
Right. Well, speaking of Las Vegas, let's move on to this next incident here. Gil, Tupac Shakur's murder, 1996. Legendary performer, rap, just especially out here on the West Coast. Hard to believe he's been dead this long. When a witness claims someone offered money to have another person killed as Keith D, right? Because there hasn't been anybody really truly that's done time for this murder. But Keith D, claims he was offered money to do this. How do you assess credibility in a situation like that, right? Because these are going to be shady characters that are attached to a violent crime like this. So you want to lead, you want something that's going to help you, but then you always got to take it with a grain of salt. So how do you assess that?
Well, you have to get into that individual. You can't take everything at face value. Everybody has something to learn. They're trying to save themselves, and they're trying to stay out of law enforcement's way, and they're trying to certainly stay out of whoever put them up to it, out of their way. So it takes an awful lot of deep, in-depth interviewing and interrogating before you can ever do anything. And they have to give you something to be able to substantiate. If you can't substantiate it, then it's there, but you can't use it until you got something to substantiate it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a fine line for a detective, isn't it? Because you want to solve cases. Some guy says he claims he knows something. you want to think that that's going to help you get to the finish line, and then you got to pull back a little bit, right? I mean, right? I mean, is that why you have partners? Is that why you have obviously a chain of command? But I mean, my God, a detective, you got to be gung ho and aggressive to be at the level you were with LA sheriffs, where you're solving serial killer crimes. So, I mean, is it an internal thing, or is there a series of checks and balances that are in the department that are making sure that you're not just running with something that could go either way? You got to make sure you really lock down something like that.
I believe you're going to be good. You have to, number one, learn to remain objective. And just because somebody says something, gives you a statement, doesn't make it so. And if they do give you a statement, then you have to run it down and be able to prove or disprove it. And it's a difficult road to split because your mind says one thing. Oh, there's the key that gave us, this is the one that's going to help us out. That's the guy we're after. In this case, just throw his name out. We're after Sean Diddy. This guy substantiates stuff against Sean Diddy. You can't. You have to verify everything that's been told you before you move. You move very slowly.
Yeah. So, Gil, when you were chasing Richard Ramirez and eventually caught the Night Stalker, you were young. It was, early in your career. Did you to describe your bullshit detector back then to later in your career? You got to come into a job like yours having one naturally and internally, but I bet by the end or the middle, you could see through crap, right? You could see tells and things when people are giving you a line or telling you a story to try to, cover themselves or whatever. But I mean, instinct has to play a big role in this too, right?
Well, you do, and there's something. I guess if you were a college grad, there's something that's called kinesics indicative of deception. And those are just things that your body does that you have no control over, that tells you when you're a lying piece of crap. And so you see these things, you go over them, you take that, what you were looking at objectively, coupled with what you already know from life's experience. Then you put those two together, and that's how you hopefully are able to determine. And you got a partner. Hopefully he sees the same thing.
Well, you had a great partner, you and Frank Salerno. Frank Salerno, LA Sheriffs, we had him in studio for a couple episodes recently. He obviously was involved in capturing the Night Stalker or the Hillside Stranglers, two guys that were, just causing havoc and a reign of terror in LA in the late 70s. And then Frank teamed with Gil in 1985 as they identified the Night Stalker as Richard Ramirez. And man, we've done multiple episodes. There's a great Netflix doc. This is funny, Gil, because you can relate to a Netflix doc. You were the star of one. You were in a very, very successful one, the one on the Night Stalker. So you know what it's like to be in front of those cameras going, okay, I'm talking here. I got producers. I got, a floor director. How is this going to show up in the final pieces, right? In a 4-part docuseries. What was the process like for you? Were you surprised how it all came together? Was it better than you thought it would be? Were you nervous that some of the things you said, what did I say about that? And it could get out there?
I wasn't nervous at all. It's always easy. If you tell the truth, you don't have to worry about it, and it comes to you naturally. The way the documentary came about, in the beginning, I told Tiller Russell that I'm in. He explained what he wanted. He wanted to do a documentary, and this is I was the person he wanted to do it with. And I said, okay. And he said, so we will sit down with you, and we'll go through the. This is how I want to put it. We'll sit down and we'll go over what we want to put on camera. And I said, and I just told him, I don't need to be a part of it. You're the professionals. I'm not. You go ahead and do what you got to do to make it good. And he said, okay, well, then once we film it, we'll pull you in on the editing portion. That way you can see what's going on. And I said, once again, I'm the talking head. I don't need to see what's going on. You're the professionals. You do it. And when it drops, you just let me know. So it dropped. The wife and I, it dropped at midnight. The wife and I binged it. And it made me cry. It made me laugh. And Tiller Russell, when he called me up, he just says, okay, it's going to drop at midnight. Enjoy the ride. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And it was very emotional for me watching it and laughing. And it was very good. Not because I was in it. It was very on. I found a mistake that I made and it could have come apart in editing. They said one time, October 1st, 1971, I went to East LA. No, that was the day I signed on the department. That's the only thing that I could find. And that was just a date that nobody would have picked up on except for me.
Yeah, Gil, it wasn't going to get Richard Ramirez out of prison. I mean, that is a technicality that no one would know but you. I could imagine how you would become emotional because, Netflix is notorious for really producing great documentaries, right? But that's you and that's your life and that's your legacy. And you had such a big role in one of the biggest crime cases in history, just making sure it came out in a way that people would understand. It would allow you to breathe and the story could be really told and the backstory. So yeah, that had to be unbelievable watching yourself on this, knowing the world's watching too for 4 episodes.
I had no idea how big of a world it was until after it aired. And enjoy the ride. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll call you back in a week. And he called. By this time, I was being contacted by people all around the world, and it was incredible.
Yeah, that's when all the groupies showed up. That's when Gil's groupies. Well, with your personality, I bet your phone's ringing off the hook. Okay, so we're talking about the murder of Tupac Shakur, 1996. This happened in Las Vegas after a Mike Tyson fight. Suge Knight, obviously, head of NWA out here, and wow, just a horrible, horrible thing that nobody's really technically done, time for. So Dwayne Keefe D. Davis has claimed in interviews and police discussions that Diddy offered the Southside Crips $1 million to kill Tupac and Suge. Okay, these claims have never been proven and remain uncharged allegations. Diddy has categorically denied any involvement repeatedly. Of course he is. Duh. Law enforcement has never publicly named him a suspect. So, I mean, is that a strike against either LAPD, LA sheriffs, or whatever it is that, well, not that, Vegas, right? How personally does a police department take that when you can't pin a murder of a very famous person to somebody? It's just out there. It's got to be frustrating.
It is frustrating, but I don't know that it's frustrating to the department. It's frustrating to the individual investigators because they know, I am sure those investigators know that he either was or he wasn't, and they don't have enough to prove it. That you can't manufacture evidence. The cards are what they are, and if they don't have enough, they don't have enough. The case is not closed. So maybe one day they'll come up with something that will go ahead and allow them to make a determination and close the case.
Mm-hmm. When a witness claims someone offered money, and in this case, big money, $1 million, to have another person killed. So that's what Keith D is alleging, right? That's what he's saying, that he was offered $1 million, right? How do detectives kind of like value or grade or access credibility? Like if you were shaking this dude down, or you talking to him or interviewing him, Keith D, he's got a notorious past, right? Whatever. How do you judge if they have any credibility? Do you try to make him prove it? Was there a phone call, or where do you begin?
You just have to go to whatever he tells you, whatever evidence he leads you to, whatever link it'll take you to, because you may never be able to prove it because you don't know what his motivation was for giving it up. You don't know why he's coming forward now. I certainly don't know why, because if by coming forward now he's got to be afraid of those followers that would follow P. Diddy. And maybe he's doing this because he wants to stay out of trouble himself. And maybe he's doing it because somebody, as in somebody that would speak in a documentary, put him up to saying it just to make Diddy look bad.
Yeah. One thing that would help is if there were multiple witnesses, right? You got one guy coming out and saying this. Does that make you a lot more leery when there's only one person talking, as opposed to, obviously, there's a lot more strength to something when there's several witnesses?
No, not necessarily. He's weak. If in fact what he's saying, you have to look at it this way: he's either factual or it's made up. And if it's factual, he's the only one that had the intestinal fortitude. There's got to be some motivation for him to come forward. So you have to find out what that motivation is. And then, so what if he's the only one? You just have to find a way to verify it.
Yeah. So this is, East Coast, West Coast, the wars, the rap wars. You were working back then in Southern California there. So it was the thing, right? Everybody knew about it. The Bloods and Crips were involved, etc. So is there anything in that Tupac case, even though you didn't investigate it, obviously it took place in Las Vegas, that aligns with patterns that you've seen in orchestrated violence where, this isn't just random, right? There's things that are happening here. So is there anything that you see just on the periphery when you look at what happened with Tupac shot on the Las Vegas Strip with Suge Knight in the car?
It really doesn't matter that it took place in Vegas. It just gave it a bigger platform. The money that was involved, the glamour that goes on with Las Vegas, but you see it down here at the local level. Two separate gangs that are against each other could meet up at any place and anything could erupt. It doesn't have to be in Las Vegas. There was the East Coast, West Coast thing going on, and there was a lot of hatred and bitterness between the two sides in this relatively new rap thing that was going on. So it doesn't surprise me, and it's no different than local areas and gangs.
Yeah. All right. So, that's when things, if you watch the documentary, there's a lot more violence that comes after that, and things get a little bit darker, right? So Tupac's killed 1996, and then the notorious Big. So this is part of the big East Coast West Coast thing. This one may be even more disturbing because it took place in Southern California, Gil. So they have the hip hop and awards kind of in March of every year, right? I'm sure you guys were aware of that, and that's when this happened. And Biggie Smalls didn't want to come out here, and if you watch the documentary, Diddy basically told him to. He was supposed to go to London, and he knew there was danger if he came out here, and he did, and he ended up getting killed. Do you guys remember that? Were you guys on a heightened alert or anything because of the East Coast, West Coast thing going on? And then you got a lot of the award shows going on here. Is that something that makes it through a department?
Well, it didn't make it through the department. It certainly wouldn't make it through us. We only get called in after the deed's already been done. Somebody dies. We're not part of preparation, safety, any proactive police work at that time. We're always after the fact. We are a reactionary force.
Right. There's a murder. That's when you get the call, right? When you hear claims that Biggie didn't want to return to LA because of the danger involved, it was just, not a smart move for him to do that. But he was allegedly pushed to go. How do you interpret that behavior as a detective if you hear that? Hey, he didn't want to go. He was being told, and his instinct said, stay on the East Coast or go to the UK. But someone's telling, no, come out here. Is that suspicious?
Not on its face, not at all. If I had the choice of going to New York or going to London, I'm here in L.A. If I had the choice of going to New York or London, I'd take London. I've never been to London. Something different out of the United States. So was that his motivation for wanting to go to London, or does this just make for more dialogue to feed the fuel of this East Coast West Coast feud that was going on?
True, but Gil, I mean, it was obvious that it would be dangerous for him to come here. So this isn't just a destination, right? I mean, for his own safety, it made no sense for him to come here. Like, but he did. And you're asking why? Okay, what was the determining factor? And if it was Diddy that convinced him, I mean, God, so this is like what the third incident that we're talking about here. Is anyone connecting the dots at that point, or is it too tough because something happened in Vegas, something happened in 1991, now this happens in LA, man? It's just like he stays on the periphery of it, whether intentionally or through good luck, right?
If you keep an open mind, P. Diddy had a reason to have him come out here, not because he wanted him killed, not because it was more dangerous. There's more publicity, and he gets more power. He's doing what he wants as an authoritarian. So if he doesn't put him out here, showing the West Coast that you don't matter to us, it doesn't make a difference. It's just you can't take certain statements and give them more value than other statements, other rumors, because that's all it was rumors.
Yeah, and especially now when we can watch a 4-part docuseries and see how these dots all connect. But in real time, you're looking at only that situation, right? Okay, did he force him to come out here, and did that lead to his death? But I think we're also looking at this like from 30,000 feet. How calculating do you think people like Diddy are in these situations? Are they just thinking in the moment, like, what expands the brand? How does this benefit me? And they make stupid decisions, careless, violent, reckless decisions, as opposed to like some conspiracy, some well thought out grand master plan over 30 years, right? It's tricky because it certainly points to a pattern, but not that this was all intentional,
Sure. And I refer back to the Italian Mafia. They weren't looking 30 years in advance. They're just looking, hey, we need to eliminate this problem right now. And they had to continue to do that to ensure that everybody knew that they were powerful. P. Diddy was doing the same thing, showing people that he was powerful. Now, being able to him, other than circumstantially to connect him to everything, is the difficult part of the case.
I know you haven't finished the doc yet, but what's your takeaway? Because you know how to evaluate people because you've done it for 30 years at the highest level and put people away, including the Night Stalker. Is there anything that you're seeing watching this doc about him and his behavior? Like, is there some troubling things, some patterns, or is just like no remorse, no conscience, anything like that jumping out at you?
Dope, drugs, cocaine to the brain makes you insane, and drugs will make you do crazy things.
Mm-hmm. So you think, well, obviously drugs are attached to everything with the freakouts, and you're in that lifestyle. There's a lot of drugs, period. But I mean, did that really jump out at you? Like, I would imagine I don't know how many homicides that you've covered in your day or solved, but how many were drug related? How many had drugs on the periphery, whether it was domestic or, something bigger than that? But I mean, for that to jump out at you that quickly, that's interesting to me.
Drug usage, not to say that he was dealing in drugs.
No, I know.
Drug use.
Yeah. Just drugs being around,
mind.
Right?
Sure, his mind, and that was a drug of choice, and he had the money to flaunt it, and that got him people.
Yeah, but how about him being like a sociopath? Do you see any signs of that?
I don't, because I haven't gone in depth into his life and investigative style. I really couldn't make that statement. I don't know if he was a sociopath before or what caused it. I know that the cocaine makes you nasty.
Yeah, Gil. The other thing with with Biggie's death and whatnot, you have law enforcement, that's could be involved, right? Nothing worse than that. That's not exactly upholding the badge, right? God, corrupt cops. I mean, is that just something that it happens? Detectives, homicide cops, whatever it is. I mean, there's going to be a certain element of that.
Cops are human just like anybody else. And that's one of the reasons everything in homicide work is kept so confidential. You didn't go up and ask your colleagues that you're working with about their cases because they're confidential. You never know who knows who. And some people get on a department that just go bad, whether it be because they've started using drugs or whether because they need money, or that's just in their lifestyle, who they hang around with, and they were involved.
Yeah. Tom Lang told us a great story. And so did his partner, Bob Souza. So Tom Lang, obviously from the OJ scandal, one of the most legendary detectives, LAPD, Wonderland killings. He's involved in so many big things. Eddie Nash was the ringleader of the Wonderland killings, right? Where they took out the Wonderland gang, 4 guys with lead pipes. But Tom and Bob Sousa said that, like, outside of the courtroom, Eddie Nash would get these guys and offer them, how much is it going to take, guys, not to testify or to do this or to, is that common? Like, did you ever were people coming to you offering you money? I mean, the criminals, because they were saying, it happened a lot when we were talking to Bob Sousa and Tom Lang. Has that ever happened to you?
No, nor do I know any of my colleagues that it ever happened to. I know cops that have gone bad, but it was all for personal use, for money. They were trying to make money the easy way, and they went bad.
Oh, sure. That's where internal affairs comes in, right?
Internal criminal affairs.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could see that, man. One bad decision that you make as a detective because of some, like, I don't know, you have some weakness or you have a personal problem, you think you can just fix it. And I bet you saw careers ruined, huh?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. All right, Gil, we're going to move on now to this next one. This Jake Robles killing. When I watch this, it's crazy to me that Diddy survived 30 years, 35 years, because he's around some bad dudes that understand payback, right? Suge Knight doesn't play around. He's in prison right now, it's just, he was so cavalier when you look at Diddy's career for whatever reason, just so, like, I cannot believe he got away with all of this, from not being, like, criminally prosecuted for some of this stuff that he was clearly doing, or that he survived it. I mean, when you're dealing, like, in violence with violent people, I mean, does that shock you? Or, I mean, that's a long time to pull something like this off.
It is. It just tells me that he's flaunting an awful lot of money. Everything that one would think is evil. Drugs and rock and roll. He did it all, and he was the leader. He was the godfather, so to speak.
And we're talking about patterns and things like this. So here's the one. Okay, so this is August 1995. Gil, this took place in Atlanta. Suge Knight's close friend and bodyguard, Jake Robles, is shot outside an upscale nightclub. He later dies from those injuries, and immediately Suge points the finger at one man, Wolf Jones, Anthony Wolf Jones. That's Diddy's bodyguard and longtime associate. No one was ever charged, right? So another one where someone dies and no one goes to prison. But it really accelerated the feud, right? This thing, was off the rails at this point. So when a powerful person like Suge Knight, right? Okay. When he accuses someone close to Diddy of murder, how do detectives have to treat that information? Right? I mean, this is a powerful guy accusing a powerful guy. So what's the process there?
Well, you have to take it at face value. You think he's done, but I don't care who he is. We still have to find proof. We still have to have something to substantiate his statement. It certainly helps along, makes it easy with all the pressure being put upon the suspect. But unless you can find those ties, you just can't prove it. It's just talk.
Yeah. This one, because Suge Knight, he said this wasn't random. This wasn't some random killing, right? This really was personal, retaliation, message sending, that kind of thing. So, did you see, and this really escalated it, right? East West back then. Have you seen gang wars like in South Central, East LA, things like that? Did you see, and were you assigned cases, homicides where it was definitely Bloods versus Crips, or maybe a Hispanic gang in East LA, or whatever it was, because there's a lot of murders, especially in the 90s, right? 1,000 murders, there's a lot of them that were gang related. How many of those did you see up close and investigate?
Oh, several of them, because when I got called up to homicide, it was unheard of. I'd only had 10 years experience in law enforcement. To get the sheriff's homicide takes minimally 15 years. But the reason I went up there was because of my gang expertise. I'd worked gangs in East LA and then throughout the county. And so you see a lot of this power struggles and retaliations and hits back and forth. And predominantly, when I went up to Homicide Bureau, they took me up there as a gang expert, and I worked the gang team for 3 years before I started working regular murders. And so that was quite common.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna be tough for an investigator because nobody's gonna talk, right? They're gonna protect each other and cover it up. So that had to be really rough. Okay, so we're looking at this pattern with Diddy, and as a behavioral like investigator or whatnot. But man, here's another incident where he was accused of violence that led to another death. I mean, what? Again, this doc is doing a great job because nobody pieced all these things together. But what is this? Is this anything jumping out at you? Could Diddy be facing new charges? Could some of these cases be reopened? Right? Could more witnesses come forward now that they feel a little bit safer to talk?
Sure, as long as the statute of limitations hasn't exhausted. Certainly on murders, they don't. But on other cases, as long as the statute of limitations for you to file on them, bring charges up, they would certainly go after Diddy again. And certainly this could hope. And I'm hoping that if in fact he has any of these things pending that he's involved in, I hope they do get him. And yeah, it's nothing personal towards Mr. Diddy. I've never met the man. But if he's involved as much as it appears that he's involved, well, then he should be prosecuted.
It's so crazy because you track down a monster. Richard Ramirez is a monster. And he fit the role. It's like he came out of central casting for a serial killer. Just very scary, very ominous, very violent, extremely destructive. But you knew him. You had a relationship with him. It's just crazy. How do you separate these actions from, okay, here's a human being, maybe something triggered, rough childhood. I don't know what it was, but what a weird thing to be in your shoes where everybody just wants this guy to go away, to die, to go into prison, just capable of such crazy violence. But you talked to him. You had to get into his head. I mean, where do you begin to do that? To say this guy's a human, but he's also capable of all this like horrible stuff. I mean, it's an interesting thing.
You just have to have understanding. Everybody does something for a reason. And if you can understand what that reason is, it makes it much easier. You don't condone his actions. You just understand them. There was purpose for what he was doing, reason. And if you can do that, it makes it easier to talk to them. Put yourself in their shoes. And how would you like to be treated?
Okay, so what was the reason for Richard Ramirez to bring out that level of destruction and mayhem that he did?
Motivation. Motivation, pure and simple in my mind.
And did that connect dots for you then? Did some of this make sense? Like he could go to that level just for his urges?
It did. And that I give all, there was a professor that I had in college, Dr. Robert Morneau, Bob, and he made me see things that I never would have seen before. And I actually had permission to bring him on to help us on the case. However, he was on sabbatical in Greece at the time. And once he came back and we solved the murder, I was able to go back to him and tell him thank you because he gave me the knowledge to work the case. And something as simple as, he said, when a man, as an example, sticks a gun in your face to a lady, well, he's not looking to really kill her. He's looking for the fear factor. That's a foreplay to him. Just like when people go see these horror movies, they're ugly, they're scary, but yet they're going to the theaters, can't wait to get inside to watch these things. And that's one form of that.
Right. So if you looked at all this pattern and all these incidences with Diddy, for instance, do you think you could point to something? I'm not saying he's responsible for all these deaths. We are saying that there's a lot of death around him, right? There's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of intimidation. Do you think if you were back in the day or if he's going to get charged again, you could look at this, you could look at a guy like Diddy and say, this was his motivation. Like with Richard Ramirez, it was this urge. Maybe it's power with Diddy. Maybe it's control. Maybe it's intimidation. Like, do you think you could go through all this stuff and say, that's why he did this? That's what led to this.
You just mentioned three things: power, intimidation, and the need for him to satisfy his own lust, which is the greed and the power, and people trying to accommodate him, trying to get close to him, that are just willing to go out there and do whatever he wants, whether he orders them to do it or not. If he's bad mouthing uh, Suge Knight, well, then it's time to eliminate, because I know we'll make favor with Sean Diddy if we go ahead and eliminate him. Eliminate the competition. Do whatever you got to do just to make him happy.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your thought? Because now people are a little bit more open to speak. My thought initially was, I bet, it had to take a lot for these witnesses to talk on the documentary, because I'd be feared for my life, or you're having your career destroyed. That's certainly something Diddy would do or be capable of doing. But do you think, you start piecing all this stuff, do you think investigators are interested by what they're seeing in this documentary, and it could lead to more charges or more civil trials or lawsuits or something like that?
Most assuredly. Shame on them if they're not paying attention, if they're involved in the investigation. Shame on them. They should be. That's just another tool to use.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy, isn't it, that no one's in prison for Biggie's death or Tupac's? Really? I mean, there's no clear, hey, this guy did it, here's how it went down. Think that could ever change?
After as many investigations I've been involved in, you learn you don't solve them all. You know who did it. You know what happened. You just don't have enough evidence to prove it. So, as I said earlier on in this interview, some people have died since then. Witnesses have died. Evidence has been destroyed. So it makes it more difficult as time goes on. But you don't know what you had at the time.
Yeah, is that a battle with the prosecutors? Because as a detective, homicide detective, I mean, your job is to get the evidence and put this person away. So is that where you run into the obstacle, where they just won't they won't take it further? They don't think they have enough?
No, at least not out here. Our prosecutors, they will prosecute. If you give them something prosecutable, they'll prosecute it. There have been cases that I've seen on these documentaries that they show on television where people get filed on, and I'm sitting there telling my spouse that never would have been filed out here because there's not enough evidence. But no, here, if there's enough, if you've got enough, and investigators at this point in time in our careers, by the time you work on homicide, you know when you've got enough.
Okay, let's wrap this up, Gil. But I'm just curious, why do you think this doc is so popular? Diddy's a despicable human. And what this doc does is lay out 30 plus years of despicable behavior. I mean, he's a bad dude. And I'm it's extreme. Netflix is doing really big numbers. Even the content we have is just blowing up with this stuff, and so many comments. It triggers people. Do you think because people feel conned by him? Like he had this persona, and you supported his brands and bought the jeans and the Ciroc vodka, but to think that legendary rappers are dead, and we're not saying it's because of Diddy, but it did happen in his orbit. This thing is just a mix of so many things. What's your thought of why this is so fascinating, and Diddy being so despicable? People are so interested in it.
I just believe it's the same reason that Dateline, 48 Hours, and all shows like this, true crime. Everybody, inquiring minds want to know. You'd think that some of my family members, I make fun of them all the time. They think they're junior detectives. Oh, I know. And they just want to know. They want to satisfy their own curiosity and show what they thought was correct. It drives them to watch it. I'm watching it. I want to see what went on. And I don't listen to rap. I don't care about that. I'm just looking at it from a law enforcement standpoint.
I mean, I'm like one of your family members, Gil. I'm always trying to solve things too. Could I have one of your old badges? Could I have one of your old badges? I think it would give me so much more credibility around here. Hey, look at this, man. All right. So anything else? You've seen creeps in your life. You've seen bad stuff. Where does Diddy rank in this? I know you haven't really covered any of his trials, but do you think this guy deserves to be out in 2 years? Or do you think there's enough trail and pattern of some of this stuff that if they dug into it, he might as well get comfortable being in prison because he could be there a lot longer?
Like I said, nothing personal against Mr. Diddy. I've never met him, but I'm hoping they come up with some stuff, because he certainly doesn't appear that he should be let out and he should be suffering for his wrongdoings.
Yeah, Mr. Diddy. That's good. I've never heard that. Mr. Diddy, Mr. Puff. You'd have to do that. Imagine interrogating him with a straight face. Mr. Diddy. It would be so funny because Gil, he's used to power and controlling every single scenario and using whatever has to leverage it. Could you imagine him being interrogated? I mean, that would be fun to watch because he'd lose control. What would your approach be? Because you've interrogated so many people, including the serial killers. What would your approach be?
To just like a professional quarterback that is just a regular guy during every day of the year except for game day, and then everything else is outdoors. Everything is focused on the game itself. My mind would be the set. I need to get him to talk. That's the only way we're going to get anything out of him. So I need to be as charming as I can to get to his standards to get him to open up and talk to me. And that once I get him to talk, if I can get him to talk, then I've just, and I'm not talking about the crime, just open conversation with him. Then it's easy for me to, look at him and see what his anxiety levels are, take him up and bring him down, and form my question in the line of thought where I want to go.
So your job isn't to own that situation, to win that situation. If you need to let him feel like he still has control, will you relinquish that, or do you have to set a power dynamic right away? Hey, man, I'm running this show. You're answering questions here.
No, I don't ever remember saying, no, I'm in control. You'll let them go. You will not let them gain control of the interview. You can't allow them to do that. You have to start up just like you do with a kid. Start off soft, get a little firmer, and then finally say, hey, this isn't going to happen. And I'll walk away from this interview right now. This isn't going to happen. Because you got to understand that suspect wants to get information out of you as well. So he doesn't want it to end normally.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because Diddy would want to think that he's schmoozing you, conning you, or whatever. And then you almost got to let him believe that he is, right? And then it springs something on him. But hey, man, I'll tell you what, Gil, this was great. This was fascinating. Just, having your perspective. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Hey, Gil, let's pump the Night Stalker doc on Netflix, because a lot of people are watching this podcast right now. Watch the Netflix doc on Sean Combs. So pump yours out there. About 4 or 5 years ago, it was so good. The Night Stalker docuseries. Remind everybody how to see it.
Well, it's on Netflix. It's it's the Night Stalker, Search for a Serial Killer. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Russell Tillard, he does some excellent work, and it's good enough now. And not because of me, because I'm just a talking head in the thing, but I still travel all over the U.S. Speaking on the case. So it did something, and it's because of that documentary.
It sure is. And then we've had Gil on our show with Cato and I multiple times. So go back into our archive, watch that. After you finish the Diddy thing, if you haven't seen the Night Stalker that Tiller Russell did with Gil and Frank Salerno in it, it's unbelievable. It's one of my favorite docs on true crime for sure. All right. Gil, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Hey, let's load this thing up with comments. Obviously, this Diddy story isn't going away. It's not like he's going to turn into a Boy Scout in the next day or so. So, let us know. Do you think he's going to face more charges? Do you want him to? Do you want him to rot in prison and never get out? That could be a possibility. Let's see. All right. So thanks for watching, everybody. Listen to the audio podcast. Check out our memberships as well. We got 3 levels, something for everybody. And I will see you very, very soon.